Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the KnowTalks 2020 online series brought to you by the Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Knowledge Foundation. Now, 2020 has been a year of upheaval and shifting paradigms and priorities, while many governments and businesses have paid ample lip service to the need for change in order to create healthier and more sustainable economic, social, and environmental systems. What real change are we actually seeing, and what should be our focus as we prepare for 2021 and beyond? My name is Sally Mousa. I'm an international speaker and moderator, and to help us answer these questions and more, I'm very pleased to be joined by one of the most prominent thought leaders of our age, Tom Goodwin. Tom has built a 20-year career spanning advertising, creative, digital, and media agencies, and currently advises a range of Fortune 500 companies on business transformation for the post-digital age. His role is to understand new technology, behaviors, and platforms, and to ideate and implement solutions for clients that take advantage of these new opportunities. Tom is the author of Digital Darwinism, Survival of the Fittest in the Age of Business Disruption, which helps companies understand how to digitally and culturally transform and drive innovation. He is the founder of All We Have Is Now, an insurgent strategy consulting firm designed to create change through provocation. Tom is also a founding member of Wharton's Future of Advertising Board and currently sits on the World Economic Forum's Future of Work Board. Joining us live from Miami, welcome, Tom Goodwin.
Thank you very much, Sally. It's great to be here, and I feel genuinely privileged to have this opportunity to talk about the changing world. So good morning, good evening, hello, welcome to everyone from around the world joining this presentation.
Just before you jump in, Tom, we just want to let our audience know that there is a simultaneous Arabic translation, and they can find the interpretation button there on the screen. They can select Arabic, and then they can mute your original sound so that they can hear you in Arabic, in fact. And Tom, you are going to be also taking questions towards the end. So if anybody has any questions at all for Tom, you can get those in on the Q&A button there as well. We will get to those at the end. So please go ahead, Tom, take it away.
Wonderful. No, thank you for that, Sally. And that also gives me a good chance to remind you a bit of the format of this. So this is not merely me speaking. This is not merely a presentation. This is a guided conversation with Sally taking a significant part of the second half of this hour. Sally is a renowned speaker, and I'll introduce her more, but her views on the changing world and her perspective, having spanned different disciplines, gives a lot of texture and addition to this. So there'll be a short presentation from me, then a sort of interview type session between Sally and myself, and then we're opening up to more people at the end. This really is a remarkable moment in time, and it seems like a chance and a chance to really change how we think about the world. Like, we have often not proactively created our future. We sort of accidentally and haphazardly create the world around us. So this is both a change in the world to rethink our world, but also an incredibly rare chance and opportunity to rethink our world. My company is called All We Have Is Now, and all you need to know is it's based on the miraculousness of this moment, this pivotal point in history where we have an abundance of technology and amazing things that can be done. And it's based on a real enthusiasm and urgency to make a difference. There are quotes that I think often summarize the feeling of a moment. And around 2008, there was this Chinese symbol that meant both crisis and opportunity, and it was used in PowerPoint presentations around the world. It wasn't even that correct, but it was a helpful way to summarize the zeitgeist. And at this moment in time, I think we see this quote from Sir Winston Churchill used quite a lot. You know, never let a good crisis go to waste. And it feels slightly uncomfortable, to be honest. It feels a little bit smug. It doesn't necessarily seem that empathetic to the reality of the hard times that the world is facing. So we need to be understanding of that, but also realize that this genuinely is a once in a lifetime moment that we can really explore the power of the future. And we have this expression called the new normal, which again has been used throughout the world. And it's somewhat uncomfortable to me. I think we need to understand that normal was a place that we all got to. And we shouldn't merely be seeking to return to familiarity, as comforting as that is, that actually we should probably think beyond normal. Like, we are either desperately trying to return to precisely what we had before, or we can consider this unbelievable opportunity to go back and to think and to ponder and to become more human. And somebody's going to be talking a lot about that later on, and be more thoughtful about what life means to us and what matters. There's another wonderful quote, I believe, from Marshall McLuhan, which I think explains some of the context of where we are. It's this idea that first we shape our tools and then they shape us. Because so much of modern society is not necessarily us deciding to live a certain way, but us being held hostage to technology. Technology has kind of gone from being an enabler of a wonderful future we can create to sometimes something that's in command of us. We seem held hostage to our calendar. We seem to have our priorities dictated by Asana or Zoom. We tend to do whatever our phone interrupts us to say. I think now is a moment to recognize that we have to take back control, and we have to use technology as a lever to create the lives that we wanted. I have a fascination with the way that technology entered our lives, and I don't often look back, but there was this amazing moment around about 2006 where we could see the profound effect that technology was going to have. And we could see the internet as being a leveler and something that would connect every person to every other person, to all knowledge ever known for free. And we could see the internet as this ambient assistive layer that would provide richness in wealth and in knowledge, but more than anything else in empathy. And AOL, I mean, it's hard to remember that company now, but America Online did an ad campaign, and they made 2 different TV ads. And one was about how the internet was going to be wonderful, and one was about how it was going to be terrible. And there was this amazing tension between the two. And this was the first time that it became clear to me, and perhaps many others, that we had this incredibly powerful thing. And we needed to be thoughtful about how we applied it. You know, was this going to be something that allowed us to speak to more people and to understand more and to live life in a more human way? Or was it going to be the enabler of drugs and of weaponry and of hate speech? And it's not always clear that we've got the best of everything. And I like to ask ourselves, really, I think if we could go back to the time when perhaps we have a large mobile phone with unlimited battery power, where we queue up to use computer rooms in universities, if we have only a couple of TV channels to watch, if we could predict how life would be, I wonder how we would feel about the way that we live our lives at the moment. Because it was full of a lot of richness. I myself was working alongside Nokia, introducing some of these smartphones. These were the world's first ever smartphones, hugely popular in Dubai, actually. And we were trying to create reasons for people to buy these devices. We were showing the profound effect that technology could have. So we talked about this idea of seeing new, hearing new, feeling new, the phone in the middle here, all the powers to empower, another device about seeing the world in different ways. And the promise really was that the phone was going to make us more human. I was very, very lucky to work with Gary Oldman. I had to fly out to Los Angeles and hand him the latest Nokia mobile phone, and it had a video camera in it. And until this point in time, video cameras were incredibly big and very expensive. And the idea behind this campaign was that all of a sudden, little moments of wonder were around us everywhere. That if we looked hard, the way that the sun was bouncing off the sea, or the way that the wind was whistling in the trees, the famous film with the leaf blowing in the wind, which names I forget me now. It was these kind of little moments of magic that we could now record because of the phone. So I flew out to LA. I spent 3 weeks producing a movie with him. And I was absolutely shocked because the film he made was merely a rubber ring in a swimming pool. So I was determined I was going to get fired because this was one of the most boring films I've ever seen. But actually, it captured beautifully what the device was really about. It was about enjoying the mundane. It was about seeing the beauty of the everyday moments. It was about having a device that meant you could be more clear in how you could see things, how you could extract more magic from things that were somehow boring. So that was the kind of the promise of this technology. This way to connect people, this way to allow farmers in Africa to choose which market to go to sell their goods based on the best price. It was a way to predict weather and know how to plant crops in the developing world. And I think it's not that we've used it all wrong, but we need to be cognizant of the fact that we haven't made perfect choices in all directions. I was on holiday recently in Santorini, and I decided to capture people in amazing places who are captivated by their phones. And hopefully you can see that on this image here, the sort of guy in probably one of the most amazing places in the world. I think he's looking at the stock market results or football scores. And as you go around the world and you really look to see how people are captivated by these devices, it's become clear that we're not necessarily in the moment. This is a video clip of people night clubbing. It's hard to remember this. I mean, I've never been the biggest nightclubber, but that doesn't, to me, look like a very good time. That looks like lots of people trying to seek validation and to get more likes on their videos. And it kind of seems like we're broadcasting life more than we're really living it. And we're creating all sorts of weird things that we don't really know how to deal with. So there's this notion of ghosting, which is slowly taking over the world, both in terms of sort of romantic relationships, but also even with job searches and friendships, where we're slowly learning that we don't really know how to have difficult conversations because it's just easier to sort of block people or to never reply. And it's raising all sorts of interesting questions, really. Like, this is my nephew. I've blocked out his face a little bit because, again, in the modern world, you think you probably need to do that, but you're not sure that you do. And he's got a PlayStation 4, I think. There's a mobile phone going on. He's got an earpiece in, and he's playing a video game, but with about 7 other people. And we don't know if this is good or bad. Like, we know that playing used to have a physicality to it, that you'd be running around a woodland with pretend machine guns. And now we're doing the same thing online and everything's separated. And we don't know whether this is a deeply lonely experience or a wonderfully communal experience. In fact, the very nature of our devices, I think, is quite interesting because it promised to be a sort of portal that would remove us from the here and the now and then take us into this abundant world where everything would be augmented, where we could have a deeper understanding, and it would allow more things into our heads, and it would allow us to explore the physical world more by getting out more. But there are times it looks a bit more like a barrier. It's becoming a way to avoid conversations as you wait for a train. It's becoming somewhere to put our eyes so we don't have to feel strange while we're waiting for the elevator. It's become a kind of a way to avoid thoughts about life coming into our heads. We're terrified to be bored and to ask ourselves difficult questions. It's much easier just to scroll down and to see something else come in. So we really are in this weird interim. And I think it's really important that we recognize this is an interim. This is not our future. This is not our destiny. This is all very understandable. This is very new. It's a very typical thing. Every time a new technology comes into our life, we love it, but we have no idea what to do with it. When electricity was invented, we had no idea what to do with it. We just knew it was good. So we used it for heating. When audio recording came into our lives, we knew it was fantastic, but we had no idea what to do with it. And we started using it to listen to contractual talk to act as proof before we realized that actually audio recording was really about listening to music and to spread culture around the world. So what we've really done is this has all happened very quickly, really. We're not used to a life that changes in 10 years. And from 2004 onwards, we basically said yes to every single thing that was new. We said yes to online dating. We said yes to email. We said yes to Snapchat. We said yes to 4G. We said yes to sharing personal information with people. We said yes to photographing every part of our lives and seeking likes. We've never really taken a step back and thought, why are we doing this? What is it for? Where does it belong? Where does it not belong? It's sort of drowned us. It's drowned us with opportunities, and it's mesmerized us, and it's hacked our biochemistry. And this is all fine as long as we understand where we are. So I think this pandemic has given us this amazing chance, actually. It's been an amazing chance to try to take a step back from the assumptions that we've made. It's a time to really question the role of technology in our life and to think about who is in control. So this pandemic really is a chance to think, do we want to return to what we had before, or do we want to rethink what we can do with this stuff? What can we build around this stuff? What can we make happen at this precise moment in time? What kind of future do we now want to create, knowing everything that we know about these devices and how mesmerizing and how wonderful and how brilliant and how transformative they are? Now, we don't tend to design life because that's not what we're brought up to do. Like, I studied architecture, and if you plan a building, you tend to plan something that looks rather classical in nature, where you know the purpose and you know the parameters to work with, and you know the client brief and what you're optimizing for, and therefore you make things that are wonderful and somewhat perfect, like this. What tends to happen in life is we follow vernacular architecture, where we're kind of given what we're given. We sort of slowly build onto it. We make things a bit better over time. We sort of hang on to cliff faces. All of our lives are juxtaposed against each other. We have things like the rule of thumb, and we use intuition and learn knowledge to create things. And these are beautiful villages that dot the world in different forms, all based around different local constraints. And that's really how we live life. Slight side, but sometimes things get a bit out of control. This is the Dr. Seuss Tower in Alaska, where a man just went slowly mad and decided to build upwards, and then carried on building upwards, and then still building upwards. And the whole thing may fall down quite soon. And it's just become their life work to build upwards to the sky, and no one really knows why. I think sometimes in our chase for metrics and for likes and for other things that feel like really easy to measure aspects, we are perhaps building our own Tower of Zeus's, where we're just seeking more without any real vision or plan of what it all means. And in fact, it gets quite interesting these days, because like architecture or the design of life, we need both purpose and constraints. We need to know what it is we're trying to accomplish and what are the things to work around. And I think it's those two things that are worth discussing for the rest of this sort of session, in a way. I think we don't often really think about purpose and who we are and what we're trying to be and what success really looks like. We assume it's about wealth or popularity or influence maybe. And I think now is a good time to think about purpose and to think about what we're individually and also collectively trying to accomplish. We are at the moment unaware of the fact that we are much more primitive as a species than we really realize. We are kind of programmed for survival rather than fulfillment. So we still make choices based on the notion of scarcity. And this can sound obnoxious in different parts of the world, but most people, most of the time, don't have scarcity as their main problem. They actually have abundance, really. Most of the time, we have enough money to survive, but perhaps too many options of what to eat. We have enough money to build shelter, but we could live in many different cities, and that creates choices. We have enough people to be our friends, but we have so many, we have to find ways to cut them down. And I think this shift from realizing that we're programmed for scarcity, but our main problem today is abundance and finding a way to make decisions and finding a sense of meaning. I think that's an important thing to ponder. Our whole lives everywhere used to be built from constraints. Like the entire history of humanity has been shaped by needs that we had and scarcity, not abundance. So the entire world around us has been built this way. So cities have formed, where trade routes and where harbors and where marketplaces have been created. That's the reason for cities to exist and then flourish. And governance has been built around the idea that the common person can't have a voice because telephones don't exist and the mail is too slow. So we need to find elective representatives to represent the voice of other people. And that's a constraint that we've assumed. And education has been based around the idea that knowledge is very expensive, and that actually the role of education is to make people who are very orderly and to conform and who take instructions well, whether you're a kind of early religious teacher or the leader of an army or the leader of a factory. Education has been based around ensuring that people are as identical and as replaceable to each other as possible. And many of our lives have been sort of constructed with the assumption that we need to own things, that the perfect dream is a home with a garden, that owning a car is a way to a better place. And it strikes me that the combination of abundance and slightly new constraints challenges these things. And actually all elements of life tend to fit together as a paradigm. So until recently, the paradigm has been that we wake up and perhaps we commute to an office, and perhaps we have a cup of coffee near the office to wake us up, and then perhaps we have a lunch break from the office, and because we've driven all the way to the office, we should probably be there for 8 hours, and because we all need to work in the same time in the same place, then we work from Monday to Friday, and then because we're quite tired, we need to have 2 days off, and everything tends to work around that. We then have shops in city centers so that people leaving offices can buy things. We then have cinemas so that people can go to the cinema on the way home from work. E-commerce doesn't work because we're not in the house at the time. And you slowly realize that everything works together like this beautiful jigsaw puzzle. And this is kind of the world that we created until the pandemic hit. Because now technology has made us realize that many of these constraints and assumptions just are not really true. There's no reason why we need to go to the office. There's actually less of a reason for us to work at the same time. It's actually possible to do 1 hour of work one day and be brilliant, and to struggle the next day and do many more hours. And more than anything else, and this is quite hard to explain, but space and time have been kind of exploded and extruded and bent and blurred by this. because in some ways space has never felt less important. I'm in Dubai right now, and that is irrelevant to this call. And as we work in a global way, where we are really seems irrelevant. But at the same time, our physical proximity towards each other has never been more essential. The need to keep sort of 2 meters away. We're seeing regions have more and more local plans. We're seeing countries break off and unions become smaller. So space is becoming both more important and less important at the same time. And time is kind of the same. Now days of the week seem somewhat irrelevant, and the notion of the 9 a.m. start seems somewhat irrelevant. But yet we're also very heightened to a per second feeling, because we're on Zoom calls that start at precise times, and being late has never had an excuse. So we're kind of going through this real shift in some of the fundamentals. What we've really seen is that in the modern era, for many people like us, the value that we add has been completely removed from our bodies and even our presence. You know, we are no longer factory workers moving machinery from A to B, but we're people who think. So we just need to be mindful that we're at this incredible moment where we get to create this world. So my first book was very much about what your company would look like if you set it up today, and how you can genuinely construct and conceive companies built for the modern era. And I'm not sure if I'll write the book, but maybe I will. But if I was to write another book, it would be, what would your life and what would the world look like if we were to make it now? You know, if we really take control and create our destiny, if we really rethink everything from education to governance to the media to housing, we can rethink our careers. What does a pension mean in the future? We can rethink transportation. What do e-scooters mean for cities? We can rethink energy. What happens when we can live off grid with solar cells? What happens to charity when there's so much more transparency in the world? What happens to connection? What is the feeling of togetherness? How do we feel like we belong to something? And above all else, what is the future of happiness? How do we decide how to orient our life? Because we have gone from hunter-gatherers, like our main duty is to hunt and to gather. And that worked well in the era of scarcity. But in the era of abundance, we're really sort of connected choosers, where it's about what we say no to. It's about who we spend time with. It's about how we curate our lives. And to leave you with 2 quotes before I introduce Sally, and they're both from the same person, which is weird. But I love this idea that we're not really what happened to us, we're what we choose to become. And we are now at a point in the pandemic where we can either labor over the trauma and the change and the reprogramming and the shattered dreams of 2020, or we can draw a line under that and think what we've learned and decide what we choose to become. And that links beautifully, I think, onto his second quote, which is the real privilege of a lifetime is to become what you truly are. And that's extraordinary. Because we never really think about that. We don't tend to sort of dwell on the notion of ourselves and who we're supposed to be. So I think now is a perfect time to get you into the picture more, Sally. So I feel deeply privileged to have a chance to talk to you about this stuff, because you have an incredible viewpoint and perspective, I think, on this. There are very few voices that need to be heard, listened to, or amplified more. Hers is a voice that reminds me of a young Dr. Maya Angelou. When she speaks, I watch her lips move because I don't want to miss a single word. That's a quote from Chris Gardner, author of The Pursuit of Happiness, about Sally Mousa. So Sally is an international speaker and presenter. You've interviewed many of the world's most influential change makers across every field, many members of the royal family, Nobel laureates, Olympic medalists, YouTube stars. It's quite embarrassing to be considered in the same context as some of these amazing people. And you've got a gift for telling the stories of those who've made a global impact, revealing deeper insights that others miss. You are a born creative whose journey embraces both the East and the West as an Arab Australian. You're passionate about powerful stories that break barriers, explore diverse narratives, and are part of a wider conversation about driving change worldwide. And just finally, because I don't want to take up too much of your time, you were the finalist for the Arab Women of the Year Awards for the United Arab Emirates in 2020. So Sally, it's over to you.
Thank you so much, Tom. We've all been just absolutely enthralled by that presentation of yours, and there are so many questions now, and I love that that's where we're starting, because this is where change happens, when we can start asking those questions. And our priorities have really shifted so much at this time, in that constant drive to just create and evolve, technologically and economically. Now, in the stillness of lockdown and quarantine, as you say, we have actually been forced to come back to ourselves, and to reflect deeply inward about what matters most, and indeed what makes us human. And, the importance of empathy, connection, the importance of being able to say, stop this juggernaut that has been going all of this time. I need time to reflect and think and take care of, basic needs like health, mental health, in particular. How there is still this disconnect, you find, a lot of times, between leadership and those basic human needs that we're coming back to, and really coming back to recognize. So how should these ideas inform leadership moving forward?
Sometimes it's easier to understand the process more than know the answer. And I think more than anything else, perhaps because it's easier, but I would like this to be the recognition of this situation. So, I mean, hopefully what I said is stuff that resonates with people. And hopefully there is this understanding that perhaps this change has happened. And while it's been brilliant in many ways, that doesn't mean that it's perfect. And that this is a really important moment in time to take that step back. And precisely, as you say, to look inwards. Because so much of our life has been reactionary. Like, so much of our life has been the assumption we need to get shelter, we need to get food, we need to acquire things. It's very sort of instinct driven. And I think it's almost embarrassing, and it seems quite privileged, to recognize that maybe we don't need to be that defensive, right? Maybe we can be more proactive, and we can select. And then that creates a very different mindset. That means that if you are a leader, you sort of go from thinking of yourself as the commander of your troops to being enabler of an environment where people can flourish. And flourishing means doing great work, and flourishing means working hard, and flourishing means being passionate. Flourishing means being excellent at your job, but it also means being happy and having a sense of fulfillment and having a sense of balance and feeling part of something. And, one needs to be aware that people across the world are working in chicken factories, and they dig up roads, and they teach in very difficult high schools. And, I don't want this language to seem out of touch with reality, but even if you are a road gang that's digging up a road, like, how do you get a sense of progress? And a lot of that, I think, comes with how we orient ourselves and the sort of KPIs of life. Because I think we're instinctively flawed in that things that we can measure, we can most easily optimize against. So, there's a every year there'll be the sort of Forbes rich list. There's no Forbes happiest list. There's no Forbes most relaxed list. There's no Forbes really balanced people. The lists of 40 under 40 are people who've sort of sold their direct-to-consumer slipper company for $25 million at the age of 32. It's not the person at the age of 50 that, got incredibly happily married and has now started knitting in ways which are giving them enormous wealth and sort of happiness. So we need to probably, we can't realistically find a way to measure these things, but I think it would be good to be respectful to the fact that we should seek to optimize our lives in ways that are quite different. And a huge part of that, I think, comes from understanding ourselves better. And I'd like to know if you've got thoughts on that, actually. And probably a sense of togetherness as well. And it's hard to say these words without sounding like a sort of neo-hippie. Like it's, if you're English and you're a bit stiff like me, the idea of a sort of campfire and trust falls sort of terrifies me. But there really needs to be an understanding that people are really lonely now, and they've lost a sense of meaning, and they've lost real connection in a way that feels deeply human. And I don't know, I think you're part of some sort of groups towards that. So I'd love to know more about what you think about how we can understand ourselves and how we can feel a sense of togetherness.
You know what's beautiful right now as we speak in Dubai, the call to prayer, I can hear it in the background. And that is just something that happens across the world. So it's kind of reminding me of that way that we do come together through congregating, through, all kinds of ways that we do that remind us that we need each other. And actually, I feel like this pandemic, more than anything else, has really just reminded us how interconnected we are, how much we rely on each other for connection and for empathy and for having purpose, because working for something greater than ourselves is what gives us that sense of purpose, that sense of belonging, that sense of I'm doing something that is beyond just, getting a few likes, or, what you talked about in terms of, how we've received technology so far, but actually we can use it to much greater effect. And, people are talking about things like Ubuntu. It is kind of the African term that means I am because we are. And it's kind of reminding us that we need to come back to that human spirit, to that sense of ourselves, and to take that and to share it with others. And, it kind of brings me to that question, because you were talking about, the way that, we're not thinking about who we are in terms of at the spirit level. And yes, it's like this whole thing of, yes, it sounds a little bit hippie, but actually this is the most important part of who we are. Can we actually reconcile spirit and enterprise? Because, rather than having economic prosperity as the goal, it's the more is more approach. The goal should rather be how we thrive at the spiritual level. And, that means so many different things for everybody, but this often appears in opposition, to that model, that if we need to be spending more in order to drive the economy. It's like a duty, we have to be out there, we have to be spending, we have to be owning. And so it's kind of like these two things they're in opposition with each other. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
I've got a lot to say. Let me structure my thoughts. First of all, I love what you say about the call to prayer, because I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that as more countries have become secular, and as religion has almost been considered to be a bit traditional and non-scientific, people have really lost a sense of a ritual and a sense of belonging and a sense of feeling in a really intimate way. And I think many activities that have replaced religion, like going to watch a sporting fixture or almost a protest rally, many of those elements that brought us together have been disrupted in the pandemic. And I think, we are wrong if we think that everybody is fine right now. Like, people have done a miraculous job of surviving a global pandemic. And the working from home experiment has worked insofar as people have sent emails and attended meetings, but this is not a sustainable situation. We all need to have physical places that we go to. We need to have beliefs that we rally around. We need to have a calendar to the year that marks the passing of time. And maybe that's a sort of rural festival celebrating the harvest that you brought in over the summer, or maybe it's something that's more contemporary, but we need that. I think it's absolutely the case that these things are not zero-sum games. Like, if you have people that rally behind a purpose, if you have people that have a sense of balance, if you have people that are nourishing their sense of who they are, that certainly doesn't mean they then go and work less hard and they clock off early and they leave at lunchtime and read a sort of book about yoga and fail to add value in that time. We are living in an age where so much of the value that we create has been liberated from us by technology. So if you were in the Middle Ages, your productivity was about how many acres of land you could turn over or plant, and technology gave you a horse and a plow and everything got good quite fast. And I think we fail to recognize that technology is not this threat to employment. Technology is this most amazing lever to what we can do. And the more advanced technology gets, the more it frees us up to add the value, which is the most difficult for computers to do, and is most wonderful for us to do, and actually doesn't take that long. To have an extremely good business idea can take about 15 seconds in the right frame of mind. And I think, and this is probably quite naive and irritating, but the more that we can go about our lives where we really think about what we're trying to accomplish and prioritize, and we focus on imagination and optimism, and the more that we seek to accomplish more and add more value by thinking better, then the more we can do. And it's extremely hard, especially, it's different in different countries. I think places like Australia and the Middle East have a more healthy regard to what work is about, and it's more focused on relationships. I think places like the UK and Europe, it's often about sort of knowledge and skills and curiosity. And with all due respect to the people around me in America, here it's sort of linked to almost sort of Lutheran values to do with hard work and work as life as suffering, and it becomes quite punishing somehow. And I think often in places like America, we haven't really seen productivity gains because no one's got time to think. Zoom calls have become digital presenteeism. To challenge orders is considered to be disruptive rather than a great way to get to a better place. So none of these ideas work against each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I just love that the quote that you ended off with from Carl Jung: the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And I'd love to kind of take you into education now, because as we know, education absolutely teaches us nothing about who we truly are. And we're not encouraged to be different, whether it's in class, whether it's in the curriculum. Education hasn't changed over the centuries, which is quite astonishing, because if we were truly taught in that framework, we would be taught about psychology, we would be taught about personal development, we would be taught about mental health, or we would be taught about understanding who we are at the spiritual level, the soul. And to me, that would trigger inspiration. That would trigger passion. That would trigger creativity. That would trigger innovation. That would trigger personal power. So how do we get there? How do we bridge that gap, Tom?
The way you phrased that was a very nice way to get there. I think we should play that video. I mean, it's extraordinary because it seems so clear, I think, to people like us that that is what education should be about. And without getting out of the question too much, so I don't think we realize that we need to think about this. You know, there are no dating profile pictures of people celebrating their mindfulness or their balance or their happiness. Like, people celebrate their six-pack or their biceps or, you know, their beach body, because we're so focused on going to the gym, and we're pretty focused these days on what we eat, but we're never really focused about who we are and what we're trying to be. So we probably need to start a movement where that's recognized as being a key thing. It seems extraordinary to me because, I mean, education has really not changed since about the 1860s. It's mainly formed from the sort of 6th century BC to sort of about 1200. And it is, like you say, entirely around making sure that people conform and are the same and are replaceable. We're sort of designing people to be cogs. It's very much about what you know rather than what you seek to know. It's very much about answers, not questions. It's very much about agreement and not debate. And all of those things are completely unhelpful in our future. So I'm not sure what to do. I mean, Sir Ken Robinson, the late Sir Ken Robinson, who I had the privilege of meeting one night, I mean, nobody could have made a better case than him, and he spent his life doing this. So perhaps there needs to be a change in the sort of macro view. Like, perhaps we almost need to, you know, create new words for this. Maybe we need to recognize that, you know, it's not about the 4As. Maybe we need to create an entirely new curriculum for this. And I think a key part of that will be being mindful of the fact that this does feel so self-indulgent. Like, I am very aware that conversations about, you know, mass connection and togetherness and forming global tribes of connected people, it very, very quickly becomes quite pretentious and quite out of touch with the reality. So I think maybe there needs to be a sort of global task force that's sort of set up with how to introduce these concepts in a way that doesn't seem quite so privileged and indulgent, I guess. But it solves everything. I mean, you know, many of the really big issues facing the world today are about diversity and how do we ensure that people are listened to and how do we get contributions from everywhere. And I don't think it's that hard, because people are absolutely brilliant. Like, generally speaking, all humans are amazing. And we are sort of prone to using constructs to get in the way of that and to think there's a big problem. And actually, there isn't really a problem beyond the fact that we're a bit suspicious, and we find it a bit harder to work with people that are a bit different to us. And we, you know, trust is a human thing that comes from things that we can identify with ourselves. But the moment we start to do things like this and to realize that people are amazing and that people have different viewpoints for good reasons, and that we have much more in common than we realize, and that the media has a disastrous job of being monetized by outrage and distrust and fear and promoting the differences that we have. But if we take a step back and realize that we're fundamentally all trying to accomplish exactly the same thing, just our strategies are very slightly different in places, you realize that these things don't need to be as difficult as they seem.
You know, a lot of this has to do with how we embrace change. As you know, most people run far, far away from any kind of change. We hate the idea of it. You know, even if we know that we need to change, because we know that that requires work on our part, it requires a dismantling or even a destruction of something that we've already spent so much time and effort and money building. So how do we flip that? How do we embrace change rather than dreading it?
I think in a way we've all gone through the longest gym class ever on how to build up the muscle, which is dealing with change. I mean, I lost a pretty good friendship about 10 years ago because I was supposed to be going to a dinner party and then I cancelled with about 3 hours notice. And this person entirely freaked out because the fact I wasn't there was a big change, and I was a deeply unreliable person, and their whole world was going to come flashing, sort of crashing down because I wasn't there. Normally, until about a year ago, people are terrible with change. I mean, people have booked holidays years in advance, and they go to the same resorts every year, and they meet with the same people. And if you'd have told me that we'd have existed for 9+ months with every aspect of our lives completely changed, with the complete impossibility of making any plans, with the knowledge that every flight is prone to delay, every hotel could cancel your thing, every wedding could come from 100 people to 5 people to being illegal, every funeral could get changed in its location, I would have thought as a world we would all be in bits by now. I would have thought there's no way we could possibly deal with that. And actually, we've coped incredibly. It's been absolutely miraculous how good people have been at dealing with some of the most anxiety-inducing and life-changing changes we've ever known. So it may be that we're a lot better at it than we thought. And it may be that we should stop assuming that people don't like change, and instead find ways to explain changes, and find ways to contextualize changes, and find ways to show alternatives and make people feel in control of the decisions they make to change. But I have been wrong many times this year, and one of the things I've been most wrong about is not realizing how well people would cope with this enormous change, and we would be wise to learn from that.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, technology has been a massive part of that. I mean, 12 months ago, who knew what Zoom was? I'd never heard of it before. And now it literally is our entire lives. We're here right now on it. This is the way we work, we meet, we entertain, we learn. Everything is done in this way. So, for now and beyond the pandemic, and in terms of what you talk about, which is how we can design our lives and how we can harness the power of technology to do that, how do you see that playing out?
The most important thing is that we don't lean on technology and let technology replace things. I get very worried when I hear about companies saying how brilliant this year has worked and how much they've saved on flights and how they realize that meeting people, across the world was a waste of money, because that's just not true. Like, even taking an event like this as an example, like this event in other years has been this absolutely wonderful smashing together of minds from all over the planets, and ad hoc conversations, and going to dinner with different people, and celebrations, and human life and richness sort of colliding in wonderful ways. And this is a brilliant augmentation to that. This is a brilliant way to take that same spirit and to take it online. But that doesn't mean that the future of this event should be like this. And it doesn't mean that the future of this event should be like 2019. It means that we need to find a role for each one. So technology like this can be a way to expand the reach of a wonderful in-person event. Technology can be a way to bring in other speakers who perhaps can't travel so freely or are deeply expensive to book for personal sessions. So the main thing is that we don't return to the old world, and we don't just jump on technology and embrace everything that we're doing now, but we meaningfully create an environment where technology becomes an empowering device that allows us to be as rich and as human and as authentic and as together as possible. But technology has to be the thing that is the lever and the enabler, and not this thing that replaces those elements.
Yeah, we have got so many questions that have been coming in for you, Tom. This one from Amani Jarrar, associate professor from Jordan Philadelphia University. She says, bless your efforts. I like the idea of rethinking our future, but don't you think we should rather rethink ourselves and go back to the major philosophical questions about life, truth, reality?
I mean, we should is the sort of correct answer. I mean, it's very hard. I mean, you know, I'm very happy to admit that I'm not that good at questions like that. Like, it scares me to entertain things which are so deep and so profound. So, you know, if you are capable of that, then I think that's the way forward. And I probably need to work harder on sort of working out those muscles. You know, I know that we discussed before this idea of happiness, and it's very difficult to understand yourself, and it's very difficult to know what will make you happy. And studies have shown it's extremely unpredictable what will make people happy. So there's clearly a lot of work to be done, and those are great questions. And certainly anchoring in the past is very helpful. I think we were obsessed with this fact that everything is new and unprecedented. And actually, most of these things are sort of consistent echoes and sort of ripples that happen through humanity a lot. Like we always seek to understand the world and to ask questions. And sometimes religion is the tool, and sometimes science is the tool. And we tend to sort of, you know, almost go on a sort of pendulum across those.
Mohammed Fawzi has sent in a question. Since talking about the future changes and the world of digitization, do you expect the world will depend entirely on robots in all areas of life, if not most of them? You know, that's one of those things we keep coming back to, isn't it, Tom?
It's definitely a question I can't answer with huge confidence, but the question with robots is interesting because it basically comes between a battle between it's never been like this before, but maybe it's this time it's different. So every single bit of technology that's ever been introduced, which is profound, has created more value, created more jobs, allowed us to accomplish more, and then it's moved us up to situations where we become more human. You know, so if you work in a bank, you know, 100 years ago, your job was to do what an ATM does, and now it's your job to have relationships with clients, which is a nicer job. There is this sense that because robots are about thinking, that rather than replacing our bodies, they replace our minds. And crudely speaking, you know, Excel-based jobs are the first to be under threat. And then it's sort of word-based jobs, and then it's sort of PowerPoint-based jobs that come after that. So the more that your job is about ideas and imagination, the more likely it is you're definitely going to be fine. But I've spent about 4 years thinking about this, and I genuinely am extremely optimistic about almost all aspects of modern life. I think we have everything we need. We just need to be thoughtful about how we use it. So the moment we start to use robots to do jobs which need empathy, because management consultants are too lacking in imagination to realize that, then we've got problems. The moment technology is used to remove the boring parts of our life and the parts which are not human, the better. And I mean, I do want to say this, I know we've got more questions, but I'm extremely optimistic about our ability to solve many of the problems that the world faces as well. We are at a situation where we have problems like global climate change, where we assume the way to deal with that is to stop it and to, you know, turn back things. And that is part of the solution, but we should also be extremely comfortable in our imagination to create and to solve problems. Like if we're able to create city-states like Venice, or build canals to dredge Miami, or to create almost 80% of the Netherlands, then we should, in the modern age, be able to create wonderful new dwellings and cities that mitigate some of these problems.
Absolutely. And, you know, very much to your point of we're never bored anymore. Whereas, you know, boredom is where creativity is born out of. So how do we encourage that? This is something that you talk to Fortune 500 companies about, innovation and creativity. How do we nurture that so that we can, in fact, you know, answer the most pressing problems of our time?
It's a bit of a consistent answer, but I mean, the main thing is to recognize it's a problem. I mean, there will be some people right now on this Zoom call that have enjoyed this, but are still flicking on their phone because they got this itch to check Instagram or something. Like, we are drawn to these things like moth towards light. And we need to fight that urge. We need to fight the feeling that the moment that we're not being stimulated, it's bad. And I mean, everyone has their own tools, and I'm terrible at this as well. But the more that we can fight those urges and embrace little mundane things, I guess it goes back to Gary Oldman's film of the rubber ring on the water, just find something so mesmerizingly boring that it lets everything else in. Try and look at the clouds and smell things that you don't normally think about smelling. The amazing thing about the phone is it's so small. And what the phone means is that we get very close to it. And that means it blocks out everything around us. And we have high intensity light sort of beaming directly into our brains, it seems. And it's like a sort of laser that mesmerizes us, and it removes our ability to see anything beyond it. And everything beyond it seems lacking in color and lacking in definition. And it's not the most interesting thing happening in the world right now. But I think the act of knowing when to use the phone and knowing when to understand everything in the world and knowing when to feel scared about global news and knowing when to feel happy about your friend getting married, it's the balance of letting that world in, but also blocking it out. And there's probably something in the sort of peristalsis of going between those two mind states where we start to, stimulate ourselves to rise above problems and be relaxed. And it's when you see things in context, and it's when you are not anxious, that's when the great breakthroughs happen, I think.
We could just talk to you for hours, Tom Goodwin. It's just an enormous pleasure to have you rounding off with the most perfect topic, really, the KnowTalks series of 2020, and giving us some incredible insights that are going to help us ease into the world as better, more intentional, more thoughtful, hopefully, human beings, but also connected to technology, being able to harness it for what we really and truly want. Thank you so much, Tom. I just want to bring in as well Shamsa Al-Balushi, the Vice President of the Knowledge Summit, is with us here as well, the Knowledge Summit Committee. Shamsa.
I am trying to connect, and sorry, my lighting is awful. There comes technology. Thank you, Tom, so much. You're always with us. Thank you, Sally. Same, you're always with us. And I want to take this opportunity actually just to conclude and close the series for 2020 by saying thank you all for being part of this successful series. We had an interesting lineup of speakers and of course, moderators who made each and every session a knowledge journey of its own. Thank you all. I would also like, of course, to thank all the audience who joined us for our KnowTalks from different parts of the world, some of them actually frequently joining us in different sessions. That's amazing. It's some loyalty in there, and the KnowTalk brand has become famous with them, knowing what kind of subjects that we can share. And then, of course, there's a special thanks for the team behind this, the team from the United Nations Development Program with us, and of course MBRF, which is Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Knowledge Foundation team. They all worked for all their efforts and made the series happen gratefully the way it is now. And of course, we look forward to meeting again next year with yet another set of KnowTalks, tackling different knowledge aspects, and wishing you sincere wishes of happy holiday seasons, and may 2021 bring you, your family and your loved ones more happiness, prosperity, success, and of course, health. Thank you so much, everyone. And this is a closure for all of us. This is amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shamsa, for those beautiful words. A big thank you to the Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Knowledge Foundation, and of course the team behind it. A big thank you to Tom. A big thank you to you, the audience, for tuning into our session. My name is Sally Mousa, and we'll see you next year.